You see, something is going to happen. Something wonderful.
My God, it's full of stars.
Welcome to the NY Patriot Show. Thank you for all tuning in again this week. As you can see in the title, this week we are continuing off of what we were talking about last week. And I have NYX back with me. And again, just something to add, with this, if you are able to watch the video on any of the platforms it is on, I suggest to maybe go back to that and check that out, because there will be slides and stuff to look at. It's not necessary, but I am suggesting that. And and if you can't, just listen anyway. So before we get into it, NYX, would you like to let people know where they can find you and maybe plug a couple of other shows and topics that you have been on? Because you don't have your own show, or at least not yet, but at least promote like where you've done your work.
Sure. Yeah. So people can find me on my social media accounts. I have Instagram, and that's NYX, NYX.1223. And then I also have X, formerly Twitter, and that's NYX, NYX1223. So no period in that one. I have been on 7 Degrees of Wisdom's YouTube channel, and I've also been on Subconscious Realms. And I've covered anywhere from topics to the paranormal, portals, and the paganism roots within the Catholic Church are just some of the few I've talked about. So also talked about like parapsychology topics as well.
Yes, I highly suggest to go check out the work that she's done on those other channels. Especially because I think on Lee's and Megan's, I feel like, well, one, I think you've been on their shows more, only because I do cover my own topics now, so I don't have on as many guests. But you've definitely been on there quite oftenly, and you've gone like pretty, I'd say, extensively into other topics you haven't talked about on here. So I definitely suggest to go check out NYX's work on those other 2 shows, which is Subconscious Realms, generally, and Megan, which everybody should know. And if you don't know already, she has been on this show in the Occult Rejects multiple times. She did the Tarot series with Mario, blah, blah, blah. Definitely go check out 7 Degrees of Wisdom regardless. Thank you very much, NYX, for coming on. I will put links in the bottom for all your stuff. And I guess pretty much we're going to let you take the wheel again, since this is your topic. And let you, I guess, start us off if you want. And
sure.
I'll put up some slides as we go along.
Okay, right. So today I figured we'd start by picking up on William Tyndale. I briefly mentioned him at the end of our last episode because you mentioned some subject matter that actually would pertain to him. But he is known as the father of the English Bible, and 84% of the New Testament of the King James Version and 76% of the Old Testament retain Tyndale's work.
Wow, really? Yes. It was really interesting that I came across. Sorry to interrupt you already.
No.
This is really interesting. Covering Michael Myers. He's an occultist. And what's funny is that somehow I've never noticed his name mentioned on the OTO Gnostic Saints list. But I just realized today, which I'll get into why later on down in the slides, how I even found that out. But with covering Michael Myers.
Like the actor Michael Myers?
No. There was an occultist actually called Michael Myers, which...
Too many Michael Myers.
Well,
Halloween, the actor.
I do think my honest opinion, I do think he actually inspired the Michael Myers serial killer, and I do think this guy also inspired the Ninth Gate book movie. But whatever, Michael Myers, he was somebody that was an occultist, and he was highly big into pushing Rosicrucianism when it first started coming around, or the idea of Rosicrucian was starting to show up in pamphlets and books. He was a huge, apologetist, they were calling him back then, which basically means you were promoting it, Mm-hmm. He was, in contact with so many, high-level people, and, we were covering him and just trying to show, besides his work and the stuff he's done, the people he associated with. And, he associated with... King James, first of all. who was in charge of the King James Bible. He was in contact with him. I think he might have sent him Christmas cards, something, but he was definitely writing him and contacting him. And he was also friends with another dude. I can't remember the name. It's in the show if people listen to it. The guy that he was in another dude he was in contact with was also somebody who was one of the few people that were in charge of what the King James Bible was going to be translated into and given to the people. So I found it weird how we have an occultist that's actually associated with two of the people that are, I mean, King James, it's his fucking Bible, and then one of the translators. I mean, this is just a little weird and interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting topic for sure. But Tyndale was a leading figure in the Protestant Reformation. He was influenced by works of prominent Protestant reformers such as Martin Luther, who translated the Bible into German in 1522. Tyndale's translation was the first to draw directly from the Hebrew and Greek texts and first English translation to take advantage of the printing press. So proto-reformer John Wycliffe, who was born in 1330 and died in 1384, he translated the Bible from the Vulgate to Middle English in 1380, but it was before the printing press, and all copies had to be handwritten. All volumes of his work were burned after his death. Tyndale was the first recognized to translate the Bible into English rather than Wycliffe, because he worked from original languages, not just the Latin translations.
You say Wycliffe?
Did. Yes.
Like Wycliffe Sean?
Yes.
That's funny. That's right. Because
John Wycliffe. So,
when we were covering Michael Myers, sorry to get off on it again,
no,
but I took like in like one of his books, he has like all these like I guess like things that kind of go along with pictures. That was a big thing he was into, was making emblems and things that went along with it. Even music, there was supposed to be music played with all these things. Some very deep shit for back then, and there was one where I was reading parts of it and it like started to rhyme. You know, it was like a poem. But it was like funny how like I was even saying that in an ICP song, one of them say Psycho Cypher's Michael Myers. And I said, like, how do we not know he's then not talking about this Michael Myers? And then when I was reading off something, I think Lisa had made a joke. It was like, oh, look at him. He was even spitting bars back then, or he was even rapping back then. And then I was like, yo. I was like, what if like some rap artists are actually really like inspired by that type of writing? That I don't know. It was just really weird. And then like, I was just wondering, like, is there a lot of rappers? Like, he has a book called The Fugees. It's the Fugees based off of that. You know what I'm saying? It's just interesting when you start looking at like how somebody who was so big into music and occultism as being as one, you do see a lot of like other people around that time doing the same thing that was kind of famous in alchemy or occultism. And it's just a lot of the names surrounding them. It's like you almost can start seeing them in music as the names these people take.
Well,
and it's just really interesting. It's like, does that come from back then?
I know Isaac Weishaupt wrote a book. I haven't read it yet, but I think it's called Magic Behind the Mic, and it's all about like the occult symbolism in hip hop music. So he goes down that rabbit hole. So yeah, it's interesting. And I've heard other people talk about that too. It hasn't been a topic I've gotten into, but I've also heard like, you know, besides the obvious that everyone talks about, Jay-Z and Beyonce, but ICP's come up, Eminem's come up.
Oh, I'm covering ICP. Me and Jin are going to cover Sid Barrett, ICP, and Wu-Tang. And it's funny. I now it bothers me, but I'm not going to change the name. I had no idea he actually came out with a book called, like, what did you say? Something Magic Behind the Mic. I was going to call the series Magi's, which is, you know, multiple for Magus. Magi's Behind the Mic. That's how I was going to call like Magi's Behind the Mic episode 1. It wasn't going to be, you know, every week consecutively. I was going to drop them every once in a while, but I had an idea of like certain bands that I wanted to cover, or specific people as being occultists, I think, actually. And rap is a much easier one, I think, to actually find, but harder to prove, I think, for people to actually understand what they're saying.
Yeah. And then you see all the stuff with that Dojo Cat, like a lot of satanic imagery and stuff. So yeah, I
think the imagery is heavy, but I think because of like slang, which I do wonder is slang for a reason. or these like supposed words that just come up and we just start using them for replacements. I think sometimes we have to like, question that or wonder the numerical value. But like the whole thing is like when you start looking at rap lyrics, I think a lot of people kind of blow them off because like, oh, it's something spelt differently. They're not even saying it right. Everything just seems to be like slang. And I think that's all for a reason. And I do think there's a lot of rap music that's actually very, very deeply encoded. Possibly even ciphers. Because you will get a lot of rappers. ICP, Wu-Tang, oh, my cipher, you can't get with my cipher this, cipher that. They do throw that shit around.
Yeah.
They're not as ignorant as people think they are. I don't think. I think a lot of people think rap artists, it's just like, oh, they're getting pimped out. Well, they probably are, but I think they're actually like occult geniuses, and that's why they're even where they are now.
Right. For sure.
Sorry to interrupt you so much.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Yeah.
So the Latin Vulgate of the Bible is considered the only true version of the Bible by the church, and translation into the vernacular in any country was forbidden. In 1408, Parliament passed a law that forbade anyone from translating or reading any part of the Bible in the language of the people without permission of the ecclesiastical authorities. Men and women were even burned for teaching their children the Apostles' Creed, the Lord's Prayer, and the Ten Commandments in English.
Yo, that's serious.
Yeah. But William Tyndale held the strong belief the Bible should be available to everyone. And in 1523, he went to London, where he requested permission from Bishop Tunstall to translate the Bible from the original Hebrew and Greek to English. However, the bishop denied his request. While in London, Tyndale came into contact with several merchants smuggling some of Martin Luther's writings from Germany into England. They encouraged Tyndale to go to Europe to translate the Bible. Once finished, they would then help him smuggle the Bible back into England. So in 1524, Tyndale went to Germany. He finished his English translation in 1525 and published it in 1526. He had also translated some of the key words and concepts in a radically different way than they had been understood and taught by the Catholic Church. Tyndale's translation encouraged the reform concept that the Catholic Church was a false authority, as any individual could have access to God through the Father and their own reading of the Bible without any intermediary, and that one gathered with others formed a true church.
You notice, like, you just mentioned Germany, right? Going back to Germany.
Yes.
Around the 1500s, again, with stuff that I've covering lately with the Occult Rejects, it's actually quite amazing how much stuff is associated or somehow goes back to Germany back then when it comes to occultism. There was even a couple of people that I covered, Michael Meyer, or MM. I find that interesting too. You get the double M's there. I think him and a few other people had even said it was almost like back at that time, Germany was almost like a new Renaissance area for occultism. And it's like you start looking at things now and you're just like, oh, well, maybe that's when it all started. That's where it's brought us to where we are now.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of occultists and occult groups came out of Germany. Yeah, for sure. So authorities were outraged. The bishops did everything they could to eradicate Tyndale's Bibles. As many of these as they could be found were confiscated and burned in London at St. Peter's Cross, along with those smuggling them. Bishop Tunstall and other clerics wanted Tyndale extradited to England to answer charges for hearsay, and this was supported by Henry VIII, but he also had his own personal reasons for this. So Henry VIII had received the honorary title of Defender of Faith from the Pope for his written work condemning Martin Luther and his teachings amidst the Protestant Reformation. Henry VIII wanted an annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon so he could marry Anne Boleyn in hope of having a male heir, which Tyndale condemned in his 1530 work, The Practices of Prelates. Henry VIII had appeared to the Pope for the annulment, citing passages from Leviticus as justification for the annulment. However, Tyndale pointed out that the passage did not support Henry VIII's claims, and what he was attempting to do was unbiblical. So now he pissed off Henry VIII too. So in 1535, Tyndale was betrayed by a false friend named Henry Phillips while in Antwerp, where he was handed over to authorities. He was imprisoned in Vilvoorde Castle outside of Brussels and remained there until he was tried and condemned as a heretic in 1536. Due to being a distinguished scholar, he was afforded the courtesy of being strangled before being burned at the stake. So they strangled him first, and then they burned him because he was a distinguished scholar.
Yeah, this is like reverse. This is like reverse witch trials back then.
Yeah, it's definitely it's interesting, and it just goes to show you he was reinterpreting parts of the Bible that the Catholic Church was misinterpreting. And this is probably one of the reasons why the Catholic Church didn't want anybody to have access to it in English, is because they could kind of have more power that way.
Yeah, that's like another thing that I was coming across covering certain occultists from back in the day. You get a couple of people that were my opinion, were heavy hitters or big names, Ficino, Myers, and a couple other people that were all. There was a lot of them that were saying around the same time that they thought the humanists or the humanizing this stuff was actually screwing it up and kind of hiding, I guess, the secrets, or just people were starting to personify stuff that isn't meant to be personified. And that was starting to make people dumb to what the truth was.
Mm-hmm.
They were even starting to come out and say that. So I find it interesting that it's maybe that's kind of what's going on with that. You were just mentioning, it seems like at some point things just started getting hidden. Because if you look at the Catholic Church from 1,000 on, or some of the saints that they even have, these people were pretty much outspoken alchemists, occultists, or mystics, you know, and their work was actually looked at as something of substance. And then all of a sudden, nope, no more. Very weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it definitely appeared to take power away from the church and gave it back to the people, and realized the church, because the church almost put themselves on a platform as they were the only intermediary between the people and God, and that they had to go through them. So it definitely seemed to be a power play that they didn't allow people to read the Bible in English or translate it. And there's a lot of, when I researched William Tyndale, there's a lot of backpedaling and a lot of denial that the Catholic Church was behind his execution. Sometimes they'll push it on to Henry VIII and, try to backpedal and just say that's not true. But when you actually read the history, both were players in his execution, which to me, both are as equally as guilty. So
yeah, they're both just pointing the finger at the other one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll blame you, you blame me, and nobody will ever really, have
and
a
it seems
answer.
like a lot of Catholic websites, subscribe to no, it wasn't the Catholic Church, because obviously,
they're biased.
It looks bad that, the Catholic Church would execute people for wanting to read the Bible in their language. So, yeah. So the next topic I was going to move on to, it's several topics kind of into one, but they all kind of connect together, and that's the Whore of Babylon, the goddess Rome, the beast, and connections between the book of Daniel and Revelation. So I'm going to start by reading some scripture from Revelation, and this is Revelation 17, 9 through 10. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he does, he must continue a short time. So the goddess Roma is an ancient Roman goddess, and she was a female deity who personified the city of Rome, and more broadly, the Roman state. She was created and promoted to represent the and propagate certain of Rome's ideas about itself and justify its rule. She was portrayed on coins, sculptures, architectural designs, and at official games and festivals. So in the book of Revelation, the letter to the church of Pergamon, which is chapter 2, verses 12 through 17, warns against Christian involvement in eating food sacrificed to idols, potentially a reference to the Roman imperial cult, which was popular in Pergamon in the era and worshipped and deified Augustus and the goddess Roma. Later in the book, the Whore of Babylon is introduced, who is generally considered a reference to Rome, the dominant power of the era and potentially Roma. The Whore of Babylon is described as riding a beast with 7 heads, and the book says that the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated, typically understood as the 7 hills of Rome, an image of Dea Roma on a Sisterius of Emperor Vespasian, shows her reclining on Rome's 7 hills with various accoutrements. In this interpretation, the readers of the book of Revelation familiar with the iconography of Roman coins will understand who this is being referred to. So I don't know if you want to pull up the coins.
Yes.
I think they were the first 2 on there. But you have the Sisterius of Vespasian from 71 CE, and it's also known as the 7 Hills of Rome coin. And you have the head of Vespasian, and then on the other side, Rome is seated on the 7 hills. To the left is a she-wolf and teens, likely Romulus and Remus, and to the right, River of Tiber.
Romulus.
So, but it's interesting that this draws such a correlation to the book of Revelations with her being seated on the 7 hills, which is mentioned in Revelation. And she is the goddess of Rome, which kind of makes it fitting that Rome could be the Whore of Babylon.
That's interesting because I'm trying to see if I can find it now. I may not be able to. I'm almost positive there is a tarot. There's a tarot card. I just which one it is escaping me. But the Golden Dawn tarot deck, there is one where there's like a lady, basically like chained to a stone, and like it looks like the guy's coming to maybe save her in a sense. And I do wonder if it like something to do with this in a sense.
Right. While most scholars recognize that Babylon is a cipher for Rome, they also say that Babylon represents more than just the Rome city of the 1st century. Author and professor Craig Koester writes, "The whore is Rome, yet more than Rome. It is the Roman imperial world, which in turn represents the world alienated from God." So Revelation has some parallels with the book of Daniel, and I'm going to go in the book of Daniel a little bit here, and I don't know if you want to pull up the slides of the Nebuchadnezzar statue with the labels on it. And that's the 7 Hills of Rome there, too, that shows on the map there. And
okay. I wonder if those, they consider those like mounds in a sense, too.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but...
Because that's like a thing that a lot of other religion or spiritual ideas got things from mounds.
I haven't gone down the rabbit hole yet, but I think it's Israel, maybe Jerusalem. They have 7 hills, and there's been some speculation about the scripture from Revelation pertaining to them. However, there's a lot more convincing elements to it being Rome than Israel or Jerusalem. In Daniel chapter 2, verses 31 through 35, Daniel interpreted a vision for King Nebuchadnezzar, who had seen an image of a man with a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass. The King James versions of the Bible say bronze, so you might get, a little bit of interchangeability there. Legs of iron and feet of part iron and part clay. God revealed unto Daniel that human history would be divided into 7 world empires, descending in their power until they were destroyed by a stone, meaning the second coming of Christ. So you look at the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And there's the gold head, and that represents the Babylonian Empire, which reigned from 625 BC to 539 BC. And in Daniel, it's depicted as the lion. You then have the silver chest and arms, which is the Medo-Persian Empire, which reigned from 539 BC to 331 BC. And in Daniel, it is depicted as the bear. You next have the brass or bronze belly and thighs, and that was the Greek Empire, 331 BC to 63 BC, and it's depicted as the leopard. You then have the iron legs, which was the Roman Empire from 146 BC to 476 AD, and it's depicted as the terrible beast. Now, the iron clay feet, people believe, is going to be the revived Roman Empire, which kind of makes sense when you look at it, since the iron legs was Rome. So in Daniel chapter 2, verses 41 through 43, it reads, "The feet and toes you saw were a combination of iron and baked clay, showing that this kingdom will be divided. Like iron mixed with clay, it will have some of the strength of iron. But while some parts of it will be as strong as iron, other parts will be as weak as clay. This mixture of iron and clay also shows that these kingdoms will try to strengthen themselves by forming alliances with each other through intermarriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron and clay do not mix." So this suggests that, you know, it's going to be more than Rome, and it's going to be multiple kingdoms that try to come together, but they will fail. So if you go to the next slide with the 7 heads versus 4 kingdoms.
Just real quick, I do want to mention for people listening, for my opinion, I just do find it very interesting, these certain animals. You know, I think all those animals, like, you could easily say, like, we see them in tons of things that I think is like a cult.
Oh, sure.
You know, I mean, especially even like if you want to start getting on like, even like state or town, you know, their emblems and stuff. It's like, you got bears on a lot of things that I don't think people realize is like occult symbolism. You know, like did you ever see the movie Midsummer?
Yes.
I mean, they're not putting the dude in a bear body for no reason. You know what I'm saying? That symbolizes something, you know, and it's just, I do think, and, you know, and even the years that go with them, I'm just, you know, saying for maybe people listening or watching, people that are into, you know, numbers stuff and symbology like this, I do think maybe there could be something even here with these animals and the specific dates. You know, just throwing that out there.
Yeah,
for
I
people to
mean,
think about.
animals do play a part of symbolism in a lot of cultures, just like the skinwalkers. They would often put skins of animals on, and also in ceremonies, and, you know, take substances, you know, to put them in a frenzy, so to speak, and become animalistic, become an animal, or not just, you know, in Native American culture, but cultures all over the world.
Yes, very well said.
So the 7 heads versus the 4 kingdoms. The 7 kingdoms are Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, which remembers the head of gold and the lion. Number 4 is Medo-Persia, chest and arms of silver and the bear. Number 5 is Greece, brass or bronze belly and thighs, the leopard. Number 6 is Rome, legs of iron, the terrible beast. And number 7 is the revived Roman Empire, feet of iron and clay. So according to the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, the characteristics ascribed to the Babylon apply to Rome more than any other city of that age. So, and there's a bunch of scripture that ties in the Revelation that makes it very applicable to Rome, such as the kings ruling over the kings of the earth, Revelation 17 and 18, as sitting on the 7 mountains, Revelation 17:9, as the corrupter of nations, and that's in Revelation 72 and chapter 18, verse 3, and chapter 19, verse 2. As the center of the world's merchandise, which is Revelation chapter 18, verse 3, and as the persecutor of saints, Revelation chapter 17, verse 6, which we talked about. The persecutions of saints, the last episode, with how Peter and Paul were both martyred in Nero's circus.
I even think with this slide that you have here, even the metals, it's really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with like bronze, like with Greece, leopard and bronze, belly and thighs. Sometimes I do think like copper and bronze can be like a little bit of associated with each other in a sense. And the belly and thighs, it just seems an interesting area for that. It's, to me, I just find these like the gold. I'd go back to that. That would actually be a better one. You know, that's associated with a lion. Well, I mean, Tiferet is associated with gold, and Leo goes there. So, like, I do even find how some of the animals and the metals that go along with them very interesting for some of these things.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's also interesting, like, that the head is gold, because when you think of alchemy in the spiritual sense, man becoming illuminated.
I mean, a king's crown is made out of gold, and then you put a bunch of things in there that are different colors that reflect the light, you know, gems and stones. You know, it's just very interesting if you think about it that way, too.
Yes, yes. So the next topic I was going to move on to was how the hand Sabazio became the Benedicto Latina hand gesture. And the hand of Benedicto Latina, or the hand of benediction and blessing, is a typical gesture of blessing in Western religions and is commonly known in early Christian imagery as God's hand. The gesture is often used by bishops and popes. The Benedicto Latina hand gesture position is when the right hand's thumb and index and middle finger are extended out, while the ring and pinky fingers are tucked into the palm. The origins of the Benedictio Latina predates its use in Christian imagery and the Catholic Church, as it was taken from a Phrygian, Thracian pagan god known as Sabazio and his motifs. Records of the god Sabazios date back as early as the 1st century. Many societies of the era practiced syncretistic religions, which are religions that are open to change and were often influenced by outside religions as people were exposed to them. And we talked a lot about that in the first episode. So the Indo-European people of Phrygia or Thrace, now modern-day Turkey, popularized the Sabazio cult and spread their practices to other parts of the Roman Empire. This cult became an amalgam of religions, with scholars noting influences from Eastern and Egyptian religions, such as believing in the afterlife. Sabazio was a deity with many secrets. He was described as a bearded man in a chariot with a Phrygian cap. Above 2 horses, which draw the chariot, is an eagle. Below them, a snake. Behind the horses, there is an accompanying figure, probably intended for Hermes, holding a caduceus, and near him there is a crescent moon. So according to Eugene Lane, a late professor of classical studies at the University of Missouri, Columbia, there are not many inscribed reliefs that contain both a picture of Sabazios and his name. Much discussed is one relief from Lydia with an inscription that commemorates an introduction of the cult of Zeus, Sabazios, in 101 AD. Worshipping Sabazios included ecstatic dances, mystical formulas, and probably even extreme bodily pleasures. The worship had a bad reputation among the educated Greeks. So, ornate bronze and copper motifs called the hand of Sabazios were a sacred symbol of the god Sabazios, a deity of fertility and vegetation who was worshipped alongside other gods, particularly Zeus and Dionysus, the god of wine. Scholars are still digging for clues on the exact significance of the hand, but regardless of its particular meaning, it shows that Romans were influenced by outside religions and formed their own cults. The cult of Sabazios' various symbols are engraved over the entire hand. Sabazios himself is seated in the palm, where he is often surrounded by a snake, lizard, lion, ram, bull and a frog, eagle and a turtle, among a myriad of different animals. So there's a bunch of different animal symbolism there as well.
Yeah, the frog. It's interesting.
Yeah. The call of Savazio's various symbols are engraved over the. I'm sorry, I just read that. Another symbol on the hand is the pine cone on the thumb, and this is the most important symbol. A pine cone can be a sign of divinity, fertility, or immortality. It is one of the most mysterious emblems found in ancient and modern art and architecture. The pine cone symbol meant the highest degree of spiritual illumination possible and was recognized by cultures worldwide. It was unearthed in the ruins of the Indonesians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, and Christians, to name a few. It also appears in the drawings of esoteric traditions like Freemasonry, Theosophy, Gnosticism, and esoteric Christianity. A lot of people probably are familiar with the hand of the philosophers or the hand of mysteries that may come to mind.
You know what's actually coming to mind with this? So out there, I'm like so left field, but I guess because I'm a huge David Lynch and Twin Peaks fan, or at least I'm a fan of that stuff. Season 3, every I think almost every episode kind of ends the same, where they're like back at that bar, then the band plays and the show ends. And at the end of the microphone is a fucking pine cone. So like whenever the guy comes out to like introduce who's coming on or whatever, there's like a pine cone stuck at the end of the microphone. And I find that weird because like if I go to grab the microphone, like your thumb's there and then there's a pine cone at the other end. It's just very weird. And I'm just wondering, like, something like this being shown there?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it's definitely a symbol that's been used a lot in ancient times, and even the Vatican has a giant pine cone that was originally in front of, I think it was the Pantheon from the days of the Roman imperial cult. So, for sure. But the pine cone held the same meaning for all. It symbolized a secret bestial organ, the pineal gland, or third eye. Some hands also had a small hinged door on the wrist that locked away lost objects, such as a mother and child figurine. The hand and the symbols were believed to hold a healing and protecting powers, according to the book Representation in Religion. The votive hand was the one feature commonly associated with the Savazio's cult. Scholars still today have not found any temples devoted to Savazio's, and many questions remain unanswered about the god, the hand's significance, and the cult's practices. While other religions have used the hand to resemble many different gods, the hand of Savazio's may be one of the only remaining artifacts that prove the cult existed. The editors of Representation in Religion conclude, as an icon, the hand was an essential part of the mental and material imagery of late antique pagan culture, particularly of its religion. And I am finding some relation to Cybele with Savazio's, and I'm trying to kind of figure out, it kind of seems like they could have been consorts, but again, the Romans were good at taking Phrygian and Thracian gods and goddesses. Cybele was one of them as well, and incorporating them into their own religion, and back to that whole religious syncretism.
God, up is muted. This is like really kind of bugging me out here with this whole thumb and this pine cone thing. Not to go back onto that and not to go off on a tangent, but this is going to be the best way I can maybe explain it. From my experience and being in a secret society in the past and going through, certain things, it's my opinion that you may see a lot of actual eyeball symbolism, I think, especially if you are kind of like half in and half out. If you happen to get involved in some stuff like that, you might see a lot of, I think, deeply encoded eyeball stuff. And, that even when it comes to skinwalking, believe it or not, I think sometimes that idea of skinwalkers or putting on skin has something to do with the skin in the back of your eyeball. It's kind of like in layers. But, getting back to what I was saying, I do question some things that I have maybe seen or been a part of being heavily, deeply encoded with eyeball symbolism. And there may be a point where you could be finding yourself, I'll put it this way, hitchhiking to Heliopolis, and you might have your thumb out, and somebody or something may happen to where it gets pumped a few times. This could just all, be a situation that you may find yourself in one day. And I am questioning now, like, if that has something to do with, like, even why the pine cone, which would go back to your pineal gland, is being put on your thumb, and maybe why it's getting pumped is because you're basically, in my opinion, I think you're fucking up and going the wrong way when you're in the situation of getting your thumb pumped. I think it's actually showing you the seals being put on your fucking pineal gland. I think you're actually being shown that you're going in the wrong direction. But it's just interesting how there may be a time when you find yourself in a situation where you might have your thumb out like you're hitchhiking and somebody might pump it a few times.
Interesting.
Yes, especially when I'm claiming that I think there's a lot of eyeball symbolism going on at that time. And then you have the pineal gland associated with the thumb. It's just like, oh, fuck, really? Okay.
And I know you had asked me about, in my research, if I came across an individual named Salva ZXX, and I did.
Yes.
And so I know you have a slide on that, but he did come up in my research as his page, the Invisible Basilica of Sabazios came up, and I was like, well, what is this? And turns out he is the current National Grand Master of the United States Grand Lodge of the OTO, and he's been in that position since 1996.
Yes. He was nice enough to, he sent me an email when he found out that I had COVID. Yeah. Because I was like still on the books. I think that was before I defaulted on my on my dues. But like at some point, if you default on your dues enough, they kind of consider you inactive anyway. And that was bound to eventually happen. But I think it was prior to that, I had gotten, because I had even mentioned, like, I was still kind of going to the Zoom meetings with the OTO, even though I had not really gone to the lodge in a while. And I got COVID right before, I think the weekend before the lockdowns. So when the lockdowns came, the place that I was associated with was real quick with the whole Zoom idea. Makes you wonder, whatever. Mm-hmm. But, so like they had, we had done things on there. And I think like at one point I had mentioned on one of those that I had gotten, I actually got COVID. And the funny thing is that like when I was explaining, they were like, oh, wow, you want to, what was your experience? And I was just like, I had a low grade temperature for a few days and my stomach bothered me for like 5 days. And I even joked and said it could have been the Bustelo that I bought that week from the supermarket. Like, I have no idea. I'm pretty sure that wasn't the answer they were looking for. But somehow, I guess maybe because the Lodge Mastermind had been on there with it, they mentioned it somehow to somebody else, and it ended up getting to Sabazias. And he sent me an email wishing me, a quick recovery. But they did seem to make it a big deal when I admitted that I got COVID, to that he reached out to me. And when I got kicked out, he even sent me a letter to my address, typed out and then signed in a pencil talisman. He sent me a letter telling me that I was also kicked out of the OTO. So I've had some contacts with this entity.
Mm-hmm. I would be very interested to hear why he decided he wanted the name, Sabazios.
Yeah.
So definitely it would be interesting. I have read that, I'm still kind of researching, but there was some, in their rituals, I guess they were quite wild, and there might have been, substances use and, orgies, much like Dionysus, but there was also snake handling involved. I know they said they would allow, like, snakes to crawl over their breast or naked bodies and stuff. So very strange. But he isn't a figure that's super well known. So it's actually, it's not easy to find a lot of information on him, like a lot of the other gods and goddesses out there. So, and much about the cult is still unknown. Even, you know, by scholars in academia, they're still trying to put together a lot of this. You know, for instance, like what surely the symbols on the hand each have their own meaning, and all the animals and everything. So he is very much a figure that's still a mystery.
Yes, and he does go by Friday, you know, Sabazius, and you got X, and he's like the 10th degree, I think. And he is the current This is I even find interesting, and this was stuff that I was even pointing back when we were going back to Gilgo Beach. You know, not to get off the topic, but going back to how I thought that was very thelemic, especially with the numbers. I mean, he is even the current Rex Summus Sanctissimus, or however you say that last word. So, I mean, like, you know, Rex equals king. Like, it's even used. The Rex is even used, like, in occultism, like in secret societies. We had, during the Gilgo Beach shit, we had Osiris Rex Meteor being talked about. You know, and that type of news. Mm-hmm. It was just like, yo, what's going on here with this Rex shit? To me, it was very interesting.
Sure.
All right, so we'll go on to the next slide. We'll get off of that.
Yeah, so the next topic that I was going to discuss was the serpent crosier, which is a staff that the bishop and popes carry. And that serpents carry a meaning of duality in not just Christianity, but in the occult as well. So, but a crosier, also known as a patricia or pastoral staff or bishop staff, is a stylized staff that is a symbol of the governing office of a bishop or abbot, is carried by high-ranking prelates of the Roman Catholic Church, the Eastern Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, Oriental Orthodox Church, and some Anglican, Lutheran, United Methodist, and Pentecostal churches. And the staff has two intertwining snakes on it, on the headpiece, and are generally associated with the stories of Moses and the bronze serpent. In Numbers chapter 21, verses 4 through 9, Moses is told to put a bronze serpent on his staff, and when those who are bitten by snakes look upon the symbol, they will be healed. The serpents are to represent the duality of the serpent, that it can both kill and heal. So I don't know if you have that one slide with the Pope. Yeah, there you go. So, the serpents on the staff are also associated with Exodus 4, where God turns Moses' staff into a serpent, and when Moses grabs it, it becomes a staff again. In Exodus chapter 7, verses 8 through 13, it's also related, as it recounts how Aaron's staff is turned into a serpent, and the Pharaoh's magicians do the same with their staff, but Aaron's staff, serpent, devours the magicians' staffs and serpents. So the Greco-Roman god, let me pronounce this right, Asclepius, made his medicine from the blood of a gorgon, one of the snake-related monsters of antiquity. He would use the blood from the right side of the beast to make his cures, suggesting that the left side of the beast was poisonous. Here again, we have the dual nature of the snake being the cause and cure for illnesses. And I just think that's interesting because it's kind of like the whole right side, right-hand path, left side, left-hand path kind of made me think of that, how that kind of works there as well.
You know what I have thought of, like, especially with like the snake and the venom idea, even like sometimes, like if you go back to like old grimoires that have like spells in them or like these concoctions, a lot of times like you'll see like things that are like kind of actually considered, or like some like you may not even be able to buy, like certain herbs and shit, because they could be lethal, you know, or it could be poisonous. Mm-hmm. Not to like go far out there with it, but you know, when I do get into the whole idea of like, if it's technically in a way death is a part of a real magical experience, could that be why like sometimes there is symbolization of things that could actually kill you but be good for you also?
And I'm going to kind of get into that here. So,
okay.
So the word pharmakon is the Greek word for cure in the medical sense, while simultaneously being the word for poison or even drug in the sense of a legal drug as it is used today. In English, the word drug does still contain all these meanings simultaneously. So how can a word mean two opposing things at once? In a broader sense, the pharmakon is what is added to a nature, a supplement in order to enhance it, but which is also the very cause of its lacking. This addresses the nature, if the supplement of the garments of skin, as both death and a protection from death. One of the most important words related to pharmakon is pharmakos, that is the sacrificial victim. It was the word used to describe the animal killed in public sacrifices. In Greek thinking, the pharmakos acts as a pharmakon, that is, through sacrifice, the cycle begins anew. We can see how this relationship finds its ultimate accomplishment in the cross, for if the incarnation of Christ, seen at its extreme in the crucifixion, is the finality of the garment of skins, if it contains in its unity the duality of the pharmakon of the left and right hand, it is because these are brought together in the final pharmakos, the pharmakon that is both God and sacrifice, the perfect and total sacrificial victim. Christ on the cross unites heaven and earth by the vertical and gathers all horizontal opposites, heals the duality born in the fruit of the tree of knowledge by uniting the duality of the pharmakon in the God pharmakos. All is made one in Christ, and in making all things one, duality and multiplicity are not abolished. Rather, they are seen as finding the root in him, as flowing from his person. So duality, multiplicity, periphery do not need to be an image of death. They only become an image of death when they forget their anchor, when the tree of knowledge is viewed as being separate from the tree of life. And this is really the meaning of the bishop's staff of his crosier. It is the power of heaven and earth, the power of the keys, the power to bind and unbind, to bring in the sheep and push away the wolves, to bless and to curse. It is duality as expression of unity, periphery as expression of center. And so whether there are two serpents or one, whether a tau or a crosier, the meaning is the same. So what's interesting is, in addition to this looking very reminiscent of Baphomet, it also represents duality as well. Eliphas Levi described the meaning in each element in the Baphomet drawing, which is defined by its profound, pervasive duality. Since 1856, the name Baphomet has been associated with a sabbatic goat image drawn by Levi, composed of binary elements representing the symbolism of the equilibrium opposites, half human and half animal, male and female, good and evil, etc. Levi's intention was to symbolize his concept of balance with Baphomet, representing the goal of the perfect social order. So it's very interesting how there's a correlation between the two in that they both represent duality. And it's very weird how this crosier looks very much like the symbol in Baphomet.
Yes. I mean, even the caduceus too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, and, just like you said, it hits on a lot of the, too much of something could be bad and the right amount could be good, going back to that pharmakon and the serpent or snake, and, it can be a cure or it could be your death.
And maybe that's what like the middle pole is representing, the in between both. That sweet spot in between both.
Right. So, trying to think where we might want to head next.
Wherever you want, it's up to you.
I've got a couple things, but I'm almost thinking I want to go into topics that are a little bit more interesting. Okay. Well, maybe here, let me see. Well, I guess it depends too. I'm trying to think what you got slides on. Maybe I'll hit on the Gloria Vanderbilt since I have that slide there, and then I can hit on the other stuff because those ones don't have slides.
Okay.
So this is a little off topic, but it kind of ties into Catholicism, and people will see that once I get into it. But so in 1972, Gloria Vanderbilt's Southampton home was featured in the magazine Vogue. And in one photo, it shows Gloria reading a book on a bed with her two sons, Carter and Anderson Cooper. Above the bed is an unsettling and disturbing picture of what appears to be a human sacrifice. Gloria Vanderbilt made what she called dream boxes, which were dark, macabre works of art, often inside plexiglass boxes, some containing frog skeletons and doll parts. Upon further investigation, I found that imagery depicted in this piece of art was almost an exact match to Our Lady of Solitude, minus the sacrificial victim. However, I did find some depictions. One is very different from the iconography, and the iconography with the symbols, and it looks as if it could be Jesus Christ being laid to rest after his crucifixion. Now, I don't have a picture of that, but there was a church I saw that did have Christ lying in a similar position, like under the church altar, kind of like that. So it's not depicted in the image I have included on here. So I don't know if you want to flip to...
let me get to it.
Yeah. So that's the Gloria Vanderbilt picture, and the kind of dark looking artwork above the bed. And then if you go to the next slide, should be the next slide anyways. Okay, so you can see the similarities between the iconography, the left picture, to the art above the bed. It's identical, pretty much.
Let me just go back again and show that.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of different theories and stuff people are putting out there, but none of them made sense. And that's why I decided to go down this rabbit hole, and I kind of like caught on to this. And this is Our Lady of Solitude, which is a Mary figure. And a lot of the symbolism on there is related to her solitude. Like you have the rooster, which I would imagine has to be with like Peter denying Christ. I believe that's John the Baptist's head on the left side. You have the crucifixion. You have the dice on the top of the cross, which I would imagine was from when they were casting lots for his clothes. You have them in the sphere on the right hand side of the cross. It looks like they've taken him down from the cross and are going to lay him in the tomb. You have the crown of thorns. So that's a lot of that symbolism in there. And it's pretty much the same symbolism in the artwork above Gloria Vanderbilt's bed, but without the victim underneath. So let me get back to my notes here. So yeah, it's almost an exact match to Our Lady of Solitude minus the sacrificial victim. And then there's been also correlations drawn between Tanit and Our Lady of Solitude. And Tanit was the chief goddess of Carthage. She was the equivalent to Astarte. Although she seems to have had some connections with the heavens, she also was a mother goddess, and fertility symbols often accompany representations of her. She was probably the consort of Baal Haman, or Ammon, the chief god of Carthage, and was given the attribute face of Baal. Although Tanit did not appear at Carthage before the 5th century BC, she soon eclipsed the more established cult of Baal Haman, and in the Carthaginian area at least, and was frequently listed before him on monuments. In the worship of Tanit and Baal Haman, children, probably the firstborn, were sacrificed. Ample evidence of the practice has been found west of Carthage in the precinct of Tanit, where Tophet, which is a sanctuary for the sacrifice of children, was discovered. Tanit was also worshipped on Malta, on Sardinia, and in Spain. Tanit's worship was still active after the Roman conquest, which she was integrated with the Roman goddess Juno, along with elements of Diana and Minerva. The same way Baal Haman was assimilated into Saturn in Roman mythology, if you remember, Saturn eats his children. And what's interesting is Our Lady of Solitude's feast day is December 18th, while Saturnalia was December 17th through the 23rd. So some interesting parallels there. And what's really interesting is Carter Cooper jumped to his death from the 13th story of his family's apartment. And I believe he was also the firstborn. So some very interesting parallels. Again, you have
the numbers
this
is interesting.
Mary figure, you know, possibly having connections to Tanit, and then, you know, Gloria Vanderbilt has, you know, a picture or this artwork of her, but it looks a lot more sinister than what you see in the traditional artwork. And then the death of Carter Cooper, but very strange, a little unsettling to say the least. So, but I touched on that just because it does talk about a Mary figure potentially having ties to this Tanit, and you can see in the pictures that that scarf behind Our Lady of Solitude is present in the iconography, and then in the picture of the artwork Gloria Vanderbilt has. And then you see something similar on the slide I have here of the limestone tunic of Tanit, like whether those are arms raised or, you know, something similar like a scarf behind her, I'm not sure. So, but it's kind of the same shape, at least anyways.
Very interesting thing here. And like, not to sound silly, but like, I have said this before. So, you know, I think I even kind of touched on it a little bit here. Even like some words that become slang, or there's like words that like originally start off with something, a meaning, and then somehow we just start using it for a completely other meaning. You know, which almost seems to be more of the prevalent or the more bigger reason of the word is even being said. You know what I'm saying? Like if you want to look at like the word gay or fag, if you go back to the original meaning of that, you are really no longer using that fucking word for those meanings. But it's being used. You know what I'm saying? Like, not to sound silly, but like Tanit, you just rearrange some of those letters, but it will be the same gematria, value in gematria, saying the word taint, which is probably used more now in the slang explanation and then what the actual word taint means. But it would be the same value in gematria of Tanit because it's the same letters. They're just rearranged differently. And sometimes I do wonder, like, you know, when people are saying that other word, or if I was saying taint, is it the same, like, almost energetic value if I was to say Tanit? So now you have that word being constantly used, but it's not necessarily in the same, you know what I'm getting at? Like, I just wonder, like, if sometimes that shit's done on purpose.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's
for
like,
sure,
you know, we have so many words. It's like, oh, I heard Lil Wayne say it. So, you know, like, this is why this word became slang. You know what I'm saying? Or like we hear like somebody like make up this fucking word and everybody's like, oh, we just adopt that. I mean, why did they even come up with that word? You know, how do we know? Well, whatever. But that's what I know it sounds silly, but I do think about that. Like, you know, somebody I shared a post that did rather well on Instagram, and like it was kind of done, I guess, a little silly, but I thought it was actually a very good thing to think about. And plus, like, I honestly didn't realize what their profile was about before I even shared it. But it was some chick going on about like even like, you know, moo. Where does that? A cow doesn't actually say that, you know, or like chirp, you know. But like what's up with like the words that we use to explain noises that animals actually don't make?
Right.
You know why? And it's as silly as that is. I think that people should be like, you know, that does actually make sense. Why are we using a different word that doesn't even sound like what the animal's making to explain it? It's just very weird.
Right. Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I have 3 other topics the cover. I guess go with Father Malachi Martin.
Okay.
He's a pretty interesting figure, and he was a former priest turned author. He was a biblical archaeologist, exorcist, paleographer, and professor. He also was a prolific writer on the Roman Catholic Church and wrote 15 novels and non-fiction books criticizing the Vatican. So in 1954, he was ordained as a top-level advisor to Popes Pius XII, John the 23rd, and Paul the Sixth, as well as working closely with Cardinal Bia. He stated the reason for leaving the Jesuits in 1964 and the Act of Priesthood in 1965 was that he felt that the church was changing too fast and the institution he had grown up with was becoming an alien form of religion to him. He stated, few people realize all the drastic changes that erupted in the church in the wake of Second Vatican Council. So in 1958, Malachi Martin wrote a book called Windswept House, which opens on June 29th of 1963 with a satanic ritual called the Enthronement of Lucifer. It was performed at St. Paul's Chapel inside Vatican City by members at every level of the clergy. The purpose was to open the door of the church to the devil's influence and lead to the destruction of Catholicism from within. Malachi Martin claimed 95% of the story was based on actual events and 85% of the characters were based on real people. Traditional Mass, or the Latin Mass, was changed to the new Mass, or the Novus Ordo, which occurred in 1969 and introduced by Pope Paul VI. Some people refer to themselves as traditional Catholics because of this and don't want to be associated with the Novus Ordo Catholics with all the changes that were made within the Second Vatican Council. And I just bring that up because that kind of shows how there were so many drastic changes, and a lot of traditional Catholics felt like it was no longer the Catholic Church. What is also interesting is in 1996, Malachi Martin claimed the third secret of Fatima. And if people are unfamiliar with that's the Our Lady of Fatima in Portugal, where she gave the children three messages, and the third one supposedly has always kind of remained a secret, although there's speculation when they said it whether that was the true third secret or not. But all that happened in Portugal. But in 96, Malachi Martin claimed the third secret of Fatima was connected to Russia and Kiev. He spoke about how Russia was not fully consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which the Our Lady of Fatima said must happen. He said Our Lady of Fatima said it will be consecrated a bit late, but not too late. Russia and Kiev is the final solution of the problem, but Father Malachi Martin couldn't say why. But you can hear him speak on Art Belt, and this is years before the whole Russia and Kiev conflict. So I just found that really interesting. But he said that Russia and Kiev is the final solution of the problem. And he said, I think it wasn't 200 years away, it wasn't 50 years away. I think he was like hitting more around like 20 or something like that. So, but that was very interesting, as well as his comment that Windswept House was 95% based on actual events and 85% of the characters were based on real people.
Thank you. That had me, I started going down so many different things of thought in that. I don't even know. One of the things I do, before we go any farther, or actually I didn't know if maybe you wanted to wrap it up here and then we continue going on later. But one of the things that I did want to kind of go back to and correct myself in a sense. I know this is totally out of left field, but it was a thought in my head that I wanted to make sure I did this before we ended the show. Before, when we were talking about the whole thumb thing in the pine cone, and I'm talking about possibly like your thumb maybe squeezing and shit. I said seals. I think maybe I might have kind of used the wrong wording. I do think it may be more of contacts being made and possibly more of maybe like 12 cranial nerves being symbolized. So maybe when I said seals, it may not have like, because people might associate that with 7, you know. So I just wanted to correct myself on that. If anybody's paying attention and trying to catch what I'm dropping, I'm just trying to correct myself and go a little bit deeper with that train of thought that I was going with earlier. All right. But was there anything that, like in the next 5 or 10 minutes that you wanted to cover? Or do you think maybe it's good we just wrap it up here?
We could probably wait on the two, because the one is a little bit lengthy, the other one's short, but we can say that for
part 3 at some point. Yes, because I know you were still, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong. With the stuff that you have done on General Lee's show, have you actually done a little bit more than you've covered on this show so far with this topic?
Yes, a little bit.
Yes, so I'm assuming there is more to get into.
The 2 other subjects.
Okay.
The only thing I didn't get to cover on his was the crochet, because I was kind of going off the fly. I was going off my Instagram slides. I hadn't put those slides into note form yet, so I had forgotten to do that one, but I'm sure I'll hit on it sometime in a future show, just because my research keeps accumulating, and then I had some interest in some other topics that I have covered within the series that people would like to know further information on. So I'm going to dive into those subjects as well as the Sabazios. I want to find more out about that, because I think there's a lot more to that. So.
No, I think it's great. I'm digging it. You know, and I even know from my own experience, it used to happen to me on Lux constantly with the occult rejects. I mean, it's even happened with me recently, covering certain topics with other people. But you'll get into something, we'll cover a topic in a series, and we'll kind of let it go, and we're all right, we're done, and then we'll move on to something else. But somehow we'll end up coming across other shit that we're like, God damn it, I wish we would have included this small little tidbit that would have made it so much better, you know. And it's is it really worth doing an addendum for 30 minutes? I don't know. But I guess what I'm getting at is the fact that I know you've been covering this for a while, and I'm letting you, whatever, take your time, and I'm just assuming that throughout that time you're going to find things that you're like, oh, that was really good to go back to this. So it's fun watching you do this, actually. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's weird because I can be researching a completely different topic, and then somehow this topic slides back in there with something. Yes. And it's it keeps bringing me back to this topic, and the pagan roots and religious syncretism and stuff. So it doesn't matter what I'm researching, I seem to always end up back in this topic. So that's why it continues to accumulate.
Yeah, well, that's what I had noticed that obviously you were doing that, and I guess the good thing about it, I guess what I'm getting at is since you're technically not podcasting or a podcaster, the topic isn't done and over with for you. You're just still going with it, or it keeps on bringing you back. So it's I can just keep waiting a few weeks and just be like, all right, so what's new, So I do like this, because it's not I don't have to be done with the topic, and you're still going with it. So it's very cool for me as well. Thank you very much for coming on again. Like I said, it's always great having you on, and you are a guest that I have had on that I have gotten a lot of compliments about, and I've had people say even in the past, you need to have her on more. So I'm glad I'm able to finally do that. I do think you are a very good researcher at what you do and what you're into. I do highly suggest to go check out her Instagram. I think it's a hidden gem, honestly, among some of the pages that I actually do follow. She has very in-depth posts, multiple slides. She does her best at trying to explain whatever she can on Instagram, believe me. She does a really good job with her posts and the art and just the photography and stuff. It's a really good account. So I highly suggest to go, it's actually, I think, a decent account for information. You know,
Thanks.
so highly suggest, since she doesn't have a podcast, and if you haven't already, go listen to her stuff on Subconscious Realms and on Megan's 7th Degree of Wisdom, and definitely go check out her Instagram. The links for that stuff will be in the bottom. And thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course, and we will be doing a number 3 eventually. So until the next one, everybody be well. Later.